That whole transaction did not follow due process. It did not follow the Procurement Act. If it was PPA, if it was a PPP arrangement, it required parliamentary approval. All of that was not followed. So they showed me documents confirming that the ministry has rescinded, has backed out of the deal. And indeed, they've gotten access to write a letter committing that they were no longer going ahead with that agreement. Again, I saved Ghana $38 million. So, please, I know that sometimes when we carry out our oversight, it may not be pleasing to you, but we do it not with malice, not because we don't like you. It's just love for country. As I always say, for God and country. It's a tough job. I'm not happy that so some of you will not like me and all of that. But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to step in and save the country money. And that's my only motivation. All the scandals I've put out have been confirmed. Indeed, those who even went to court seeking to take me on, they lost. Check all the court cases. Because I make sure that I always secure unimpeachable, irrefutable, and incontrovertible evidence before I put these matters out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further question?
Question. Mr. Chairman, I go back to this 38 million. It is not true that you have saved Ghana $38 million because Ghana was not going
Honorable
to
member, it is not for you to establish, it is not for you to establish whether it is true or it is not true. If you want to go that tangent, we may not be able to. You have asked a question, the nominee has provided the answer. So how do we create the opportunity for you to say it is not true? He also say it is true. So please, take his answer, whether true or not. So proceed to answer, to ask another question.
With all due respect, in that particular transaction, Ghana government was not going to pay any money. That is the point I'm making. So if Ghana government is not going to pay any money, how do you save Ghana government that money? That is the point I'm making.
Is that your question?
That is the point I was just trying to clarify.
You are not here to make a point. You can put that to him as a question, and then you can elicit the answer.
Okay. Mr. Nominee, would you agree with me? That was the investigation that you did, and you said the briefing that you had from the officers at the ministry. You came to the conclusion that you did save Ghana the 38 million, and that Ghana was going to pay the 38 million. And if that was the case, can you please tell the committee how that payment was going to happen or come about? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your response, please.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. I thought that the former Honorable Deputy Minister will confirm that they have backed out of that agreement since my expose. I think that's a more fundamental point, that if you felt that nothing untoward had happened, that everything was kosher, that it was a good deal, why did you run away from it when, I did the expose? So
please, you are not entitled to ask him questions. So provide answers
yes, Chairman,
to the question he asks.
I appreciate the guidance. So let's be clear. The $38 million is what Access, the company, stood to benefit from that agreement based on the percentage that will go to that company. If the current arrangement is maintained, where the embassies are allowed to carry out their visa processing, that money comes to Ghana, which is the current arrangement. That is why the head of missions were not happy about this arrangement, because Ghana was going to lose money. You were taking money out of the missions, out of IGF, for a private entity. That was the nature of the transaction. That is why I conclude, based on the conservative analysis we did, that we have saved Ghana $38 million. And I can make the agreement available, Mr. Chairman, if the committee would want to see it.
Thank you very much.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
further questions, or you are done?
There are further questions. I don't want to go there again because I was highly involved in this particular matter that he's spoken about. Mr. Chairman, I will want to ask the nominee, honorable nominee, in the international multilateral arena, it is changing rapidly. Big alliances are reshaping in a very dynamic ways. How do you plan to champion a strong African representation in the international systems?
Well, thank you very much for this well-informed question. And I wish I had 1 hour to answer this, but I certainly don't. You are right.
Please, did you say you need 1 hour to answer the question?
I said I certainly don't have that. So
Please.
So, Mr. Chairman, first of all, the changing global dynamics have to be appreciated. We are clearly now in a multipolar world. We've moved from unipolar to bipolar. Now we are in multipolar. We are seeing the growing influence of the BRICS countries. Some of our citizens are even beginning to mount pressure that perhaps we should join BRICS, just as Nigeria did a few weeks ago. And we all know that BRICS is now presenting very interesting options. They have the new development bank, which has about $100 billion available in there. A combined GDP of about 27 trillion US dollars, 40% of the world's population. So in terms of market, that is a large market share. And we all know that our biggest trading partner now is China. And China is at the center, is right in there in this BRICS arrangement. So I think that Africa should really come to this table in a united way. Imagine what we can achieve, as Osajifo said, if we unite. At the UN, for example, the African bloc is the biggest bloc. We have more votes at the UN, but unfortunately we are not united. We don't vote in a particular way. Different, considerations. And it's the same challenge even with trade. Intra-Africa trade is still hovering under 20%. We trade more with Europe and Asia than we trade amongst ourselves. A very, very sad situation. And that's why Kwame Nkrumah muted the idea of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area in Addis Ababa in 1963. It took more than 40 years for it to now be coming into fruition, albeit in a very slow pace. So my response to you will be that let us unite. And I'm glad that President Mahama has so much goodwill. Look at the number of heads of states who attended his inauguration. And already he has so many invitations. He's just returned from Tanzania, Kenya, and everybody wants to, host him and have a discussion with him. And I think that he has that potential of not only becoming the focal point, a potential AU chairman, to really galvanize Africa and get the African nations to unite so that together we can have a common position on what the African interests should be. So that would be my approach, going back to the Nkrumah template of Africa must unite. Let's present a common force. And with that, we are talking about a market of about 1.5 billion. If we unite, we will be such a force that nobody can dare mess with us. But the challenge has been disunity. And that is really my philosophical outlook on these matters.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You just mentioned the African Continental Free Trade. Yes. Mr. Nominee, until the NPP government was able to secure the use of Ghana as the base for the AFTA Secretariat. Ghana has been an active member of many multilateral platforms, but hasn't really attracted any significant secretariat comparable to the AU in Addis Ababa, or the UN office in Nairobi, or ECOWAS in Abuja. This is important because the borders are attracting jobs into their countries, or these countries are attracting jobs and opportunities into their countries. As Foreign Minister, how do you plan to leverage this position, Ghana being the Secretariat of AFTA, to attract something tangible into the country?
I mean, certainly I have gone on record in this House to commend your government for securing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. And I added, if you recall in that presentation, that it is a testimony of what we can achieve when we unite. I recall that former President Akufo-Addo reached out to former President Mahama, former President Rawlings, God bless his soul, former President Kufuor, and all of us across the divide, and said, look, let's form a joint campaign team and campaign for this secretariat. And that is why we were such a formidable force and we secured it. So I'm a bit disappointed that you have tried to partisan it and you have discounted the contributions that all of these former heads of states, particularly from my side of the political divide, did. And don't forget that the reason why it was also easy for Ghana to win the secretariat is because of Ghana's consistency. Kwame Nkrumah had mooted this idea on 25th May 1963, and then in 2012, January 2012, Professor John Evans Atta Mills, a renowned Nkrumahist, revived the discussion at the 18th ordinary session of the AU. He moved the motion that we must go back to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And that is why heads of state said that, look, Ghana's consistency on this matter, you are deserving to host the secretariat. So I think that it's a collective effort, CPP, NDC, MPP, all of us, and it shouldn't be partisan. But having said that, the thrust of your question is how we can leverage this. We need to make sure that we are hosting and winning. So as we host, we are getting more jobs created. Often there are concerns when these secretariats begin to recruit that it doesn't really favor locals and that they bring in a lot of outsiders. And these outsiders often get the top jobs. And then, you know, we are left with jobs that are not that rewarding. I intend to engage with the dynamic Secretary General, Wankele Meni, and I think that we should look at a plan on how we can really leverage on hosting, because we are spending so much money hosting. Some of the staff have also expressed concern about their working conditions and all of that. And I think that these are matters we can discuss in confidence and see how we boost employment opportunities for our people.
Because I overrule your first question, you have your last questions to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Ablakwa, I do wish you well, and I know you will succeed. My last question. The African Union seems to have a credibility problem among young Africans, in that it is perceived as weak and toothless on the international stage. For example, in matters regarding the overstay of certain African leaders in power, the countless tragic deaths of African migrants crossing Sahara and the Mediterranean, and in the vocal defense of African interests on the global stage, the organization is found wanting. The AU, unlike the EU, appears to be too timid on behalf of its people. What would you, as Foreign Minister, do to help change this negative perception about the AU?
Well, thank you very much, Honorable former Minister, for your kind wishes. and I must place on record that,
Former
former deputy minister, that you prophesied 8 years ago that I will be minister of foreign affairs. So I was quite surprised when in your earlier submissions you sought to take me on. But, Mr. Chairman, on the more serious note, if the Osagefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was alive, his response to this, your question, will be, I told you so. Remember that when he led the Casablanca group, he wanted a more integral, united African states, a strong political force. He added that we must have a standby force, military force, we must have a bank, we must have a common currency, we must remove all trade barriers, trade tariffs, artificial borders, which are relics of the Berlin Conference when Otto von Bismarck called his friends in Europe and shared Africa amongst themselves. But unfortunately, the Monrovia group prevailed, and they said, let's have a loose union without an Africa standby force, without a bank, and all of these, political structures that the visionary Kwame Nkrumah put forward. So I think at the heart of this perception of the AU is about continental Africa unity and how we must go back to the original Nkrumah blueprint, as was espoused by the Casablanca group. And I am glad that already those talks have begun within the AU. There are massive reforms going on. Indeed, some countries have even said that they will not pay their full access contributions unless they see greater reform and see the AU become more, transparent and more, beneficial to the African people. So it's good that those discussions are continuing. President Paul Kagame is leading the reforms, and President Mahama has already struck a very good, chord with him, and I'm sure that they will continue to champion those reforms. But ultimately, you may call me an Nkrumahist, but ultimately, we must go back to Kwame Nkrumah's vision of the United States of Africa. That really is what will make the AU strong and more impactful.
I will proceed to give the floor to
my follow-up, please.
Your follow-up on this.
My question. This
very
is
well,
my
very well.
Mr. Nominee, let me take you on to social media because you are a key player in that particular area. Social media has become a source of misinformation and disinformation, undermining the ability of leaders in West Africa to mobilize public support for its decisions and development agenda. You are one of the leading politicians who uses social media a lot to get your message and interest across. Looking at the generality of the situation and the concerns across the political divide, what are some of the initiatives that you will promote to overcome this dangerous development?
Well, thank you very much. I take the view that social media is a double-edged sword. It can be a force for good, and then if it's misused, it can be weaponized and used as a destructive element. I think that African leaders should become conscious of the new age, new media, and we should encourage more transparency. My view is that if African leaders and African governments adopt an open governance architecture, if they are more transparent, they are more accountable, then the people will know. Knowledge is power. It will not be easy for the people to be misled. Unfortunately, in Africa, you struggle to get information. If you are not an interceptor general, then God help you, So, Mr. Chairman, I really would say that let's have more open governance. The RTI has been passed in Ghana, but in terms of its success in implementation, there is much to be desired. And then our regulatory bodies should clamp down on those who are misusing social media for disinformation, misinformation. They create fake accounts. And unfortunately, even some governments on the continent are responsible. They have these fake news factories They pay people to just, put out fake news. Will you believe that on my way to this vetting, few days in the run-up to this vetting, there was fake news all over that I have started deleting my Facebook messages, my Facebook exposés. All over, people were sharing it. And some people believed it, that I'm indeed deleting my Facebook posts. Why will I? I'm not a coward. I'm not one I stand by my convictions. I'm a conviction politician. So fake news is a real problem. But I think that as for social media, it's come to stay. Let's encourage more open governance, more transparency, and we should be fine with social media.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Haji Aladi Ayamba, Honorable.
Always soared high. I like the energy and the way you have always been able to work. And I would say, indeed, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama has done exactly what is expected to him, because he has rewarded hard work for not only the party, but Ghana as a whole. And for all of us. Now, my question is, there is an acronym that has now become an international song. When even people say it, others will begin running. Someone wanted to say helter skelter and said skelter skelter. So, and the acronym is ORAL. Operation Recover or Loot. I know you wouldn't belong to any team that will be doing anything adverse. So far, my observations and what I've seen, it has been good. Because I've listened, I have watched. Now, sooner than later, ORAL as a team needs to have a way forward. What is ORAL going to do so that all the things that you have done, the time, and now that you are not even being paid, you are just doing a yeoman's job, it wouldn't go waste. We would actually benefit from it. And then, can you tell us also, apart from the way forward, can you tell us also, this particular activity that you have undertaken, how much have you saved Ghanaians from these corrupt activities that has bedeviled the country and taken so much from Ghanaian taxpayers? Thank you.
Honorable member, proceed to ask the question. But because we don't have any evidence of evaluation of how much ORAL has been able to save, proceed to answer the question minus that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. And let me commend my big sister for her question and thank her for her kind words. She's been one of our mothers. We all go to her for advice, and she's always generous with her counseling and guidance. Mr. Chairman, as I said in my introduction, one of the jobs that I am so proud of, and I'll remain ever so proud of, is this sacrificial job to chair ORAL, Operation Recover or Loot, which is a major plank in President Mahama's anti-corruption drive. The establishment of ORAL is such a masterstroke and President Mahama ought to be commended. I can reveal to you today that since oral was established, just by the establishment of the team and we receiving information from the general public, we have saved this country 20 bungalows which were going to be demolished. 20. And I can provide the list. Bungalows that were being occupied by staff of Research Department of the Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Gender, the CSIR. Bulldozers had moved in, but because they called the Oral Secretariat, and we then called National Security to take action, they were able to protect these bungalows. I have not added the Du Bois Center, the NDA lands, which were about to be captured. So President Mahama has saved this country a great deal with the establishment of oral, and all of us must support oral. Now we are having an international discussion. Many people forget that oral has international dimensions. I need not remind our colleagues here that President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has been an oral champion in the international arena. Why do I say that? He has been advocating for reparation, that our colonial masters who looted Africa, they should bring it back, return our monies, our artifacts, return the loot. So I'm so shocked that our friends who started oral even before President Mahama won the election in the international arena, when they come home, they don't want to hear about oral. This is quite remarkable. You know, and I would have thought that charity will begin at home. You want the Brits and the French and the Dutch and others to return the loot. But back home, you want looters to go scot-free. Let's not do anything about looting. I find it really contradictory. So let's see some consistency. The other international dimension about oral is that if you check the ECOWAS protocols, the AU Charter, and all the UN charters and all of that, anti-corruption is a major, major plank. According to the World Bank, Africa is losing about $88 billion every year because of corruption. $88 billion, and those are conservative estimates. Imagine what that money, if it stays in the continent, used for the development of the people's welfare, how our continent will look like. So as for oral, all of us must support it. And if you look at what has gone on in this country over the last 8 years, look, I have a tall list of monies that can be retrieved. SkyTrain, we can get our $2.5 million back. Ejapa, we can get our $12 million back. National Cathedral, we can get our $58 million back.